The Phoenix Suns have yet to extend their 2018 number 1 overall pick Deandre Ayton. They have until October 18th to reach an agreement with Deandre, but over this past week, Woj has said the talks have stalled between Deandre Ayton and the Suns. Now, Deandre Ayton had a pretty average first 2 seasons in the league, having his injury problems and other problems off the court. But last year, he was a key piece to a Suns team that made it all the way to the NBA Finals. Last year, in last year's playoffs, Deandre Ayton averaged 16 points per game, 12 boards a game, 1.1 blocks per game, and playing 36 minutes per game. As I said, a key piece to the Phoenix Suns' run to the NBA Finals. Deandre Ayton also had one of the most memorable moments of the 2021 playoffs with that Game 2 winner versus the Clippers, catching that lob over DeMarcus Cousins. You know, that's one of the most memorable moments from the 2021 playoffs. So, we know with all that considered, Deandre Ayton wants nothing less than a max contract. And when you look around at other guys getting the max contract in his draft class, a lot of people like Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Michael Porter Jr. and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, then you can understand why Deandre wants the max contract, because you know he's got further than all of these guys in the playoffs. And as I said, he's only 23. He can still get better, and he was picked above all these guys in 2018 as well. So from Deandre Ayton's side, you know, it's pretty obvious why he wants the max, especially when you see like Michael Porter Jr. and Shai. I think they're two great players, but you know, I don't think neither, you know, realistically have earned the max. You know, obviously Shai's at OKC and they're building a young team. I can understand that. Michael Porter Jr. obviously the Nuggets had to keep him, but it's a lot of money, and when you look around, it makes Deandre Ayton getting a max contract more reasonable. And of course, the Suns, they picked Deandre Ayton over all these guys, so they clearly have faith in him. So I don't see why not give him the max contract. You know, they have faith in the guy. They picked him number 1 overall. But the question is, why haven't the Phoenix Suns offered him the max yet? Well, number 1, their owner has the reputation of being a bit of a tight arse. You know, not spending too much money, keeping, you know, as much money back as he can. That's his reputation, you know, over the years. And the second reason as to why the Suns haven't offered Deandre Ayton the max yet is, as good as Deandre was for the Suns last year, is he really a max level player? First of all, he plays at the centre position and he can't stretch the floor. And you know, those kind of centres don't usually get max money, with Rudy Gobert being the exception. You know, obviously Joel Embiid's, Nikola Jokic's, Anthony Davis's, they can all stretch the floor. That's why they get the big money. Usually, traditional centres, I'm thinking of Andre Drummond right now, who's in his prime. He's on the veteran minimum. Those kind of centres don't usually get big money. And as I said, Rudy Gobert was the exception to this rule. But I think most people would agree, as of right now anyway, after what Gobert did last year, even after winning DPOI, that he got overpaid. Now, the Suns could bring in a traditional centre in for 5 to 10 million to do 60% of what DeAndre Ayton does at the moment for the Suns, which is protect their rim, block shots, be a pick and roll threat, and grab rebounds. Now, obviously the flip side to this is that DeAndre is only 23 years old and he could improve his outside shooting as time goes on. He's got a small bit of a mid-range game. You know, I saw him against the Lakers. Obviously, I'm a Lakers fan in this year's playoffs, and first of all, he was unbelievable against the Lakers. He definitely won the Andre Drummond matchup, but I think he can, over the years, I think he could step out and stretch the floor a bit for the Suns. But I'm just looking from the Suns owner's perspective, that maybe they think, why give this guy the max contract when we can bring a guy in for $5 to $10 million a year to do 60% of what DeAndre Ayton does for them. That's just, you know, the flip side, I suppose. Overall, I am surprised that DeAndre Ayton hasn't agreed an extension with the Suns yet, especially after the Suns committed to Chris Paul, and you know, both he and DeAndre Ayton play very well together. And obviously, if you're going to commit to Chris Paul, giving him 4 years, $120 million, bringing him up to 40 years old, if you're willing to commit to Chris Paul, I don't see why you're not willing to commit to a 23-year-old number 1 overall pick, DeAndre Ayton, who's playing very well for them this past season. Now, obviously, DeAndre Ayton wants the max, and he's right to ask for that. As I said earlier on, people like Shai, MPJ getting that kind of money, he deserves that as well. But I think the plan for Phoenix is to give him the kind of money that John Collins got, which is just, you know, below the max level money. Still a lot of money, but just not quite max level money. That's what I think Phoenix's plan is. But I think DeAndre Ayton is still going to hold out for that max contract. Personally, I think it would just make more sense to keep this core of Devin Booker, Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton together, keep the stability, you know, which the Suns as a franchise haven't had for ages. You know, until this year they went 10 years without making the playoffs. They need a bit of stability. They got a good young core with Booker and Ayton, and then you put an older Chris Paul in the middle of that. They got a good core. I don't see why to upset the apple cart. Keep the band together, keep some stability, and try and improve. I think the Suns need to go down the Utah Jazz road of this. The Jazz kept their core together of Mitchell and Gobert, keeping those two happy. Again, a shooting guard and a center who can shoot threes, and so they got Mike Conley as well. So I think Utah are very similar to Phoenix. And I think Phoenix just need to go down that road and try and keep this core together for as long as they can and see what they can do. Now, I don't know where Deandre Ayton could go next off season if he's not extended by the Suns before October 18th, and then once again they can't. And then if they don't reach an agreement next off season, other than Phoenix, I just can't see where Deandre Ayton's going to go, because there's not a lot of cap space out there for next off season. Most teams have used it all up. The only teams who have cap space are like the Spurs and probably the Pistons or maybe the Rockets. I don't know. I think it has to be anybody, maybe the Spurs, but in my opinion, I just think DeAndre Ayton will end up staying in Phoenix. I think he'll end up getting the max, because I just think it makes too much sense to keep DeAndre Ayton around. I don't see what the problem is here. I don't see why the Suns management aren't going for it and just re-sign him, keep the band together. But who knows? I have to wait and see what happens. But anyway, guys, tell me what you guys think. Will DeAndre Ayton end up staying in Phoenix, or will they just not reach an agreement? And will DeAndre Ayton end up moving on next offseason? Tell me in the comments below. But all I said, thanks for watching the video, and I'm out of here.